Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know everyone is very busy. I really appreciate your time, and I'm going to go through things very quickly so that we have an opportunity to learn more about the development deal. And then Alan DeLisle is also going to speak for about 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. My name is Kari Mueller, and I live in the Campbell Park neighborhood, just south of the Tropicana field. I really appreciate your time. I know everyone's got a lot of things going on, and it should be about a 40-minute presentation with about 20 minutes for questions and answers. I just want to go through the basics of the Rays Stadium and the gas plant redevelopment. And Alan DeLisle will also be presenting information on the current development agreement that was just released on April 25th. I'll also go over the timeline and the process as the proposal moves through City Council. We are going to host a Zoom meeting every Monday night until City Council votes on the project. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to nohomerun.com. Please send a message to 5 of your friends to watch the recording and to tune in next Monday. Most importantly, we ask that you call or write your City Council member by the end of May. Residents won't get to vote on this important project, so your call and your letter is your voice, and it will be put on public record. You can also attend a City Council open forum session and express your views. Please visit nohomerun.com and let us know if you would like a yard sign. In regards to the Rays-Hines proposal, we want to keep the Tampa Bay Rays in St. Petersburg, but other cities have struck much better deals, and there is no reason why St. Petersburg should pay more than other cities and get less. We want to make sure that the amount of community benefits that we are receiving are fair based on the substantial amount of public investment. Recently, I completed serving as a volunteer on the Community Benefits Advisory Council for the Historic Gas Plant District Redevelopment Project. I've analyzed the project in great detail, and I have been following closely since Mayor Welch got elected and restarted the RFP process. Previously, I worked at the City of Miami as a professional engineer. I reviewed construction plans for public works, and I often reviewed Midtown Development drawings, who were the previous developer of the Tropicana field. As I have learned more and more about the current Rays-Hines development proposal, I have significant concerns about moving forward into a 30-year partnership with Rays-Hines. First, I'm going to spend about 20 minutes talking about how we got to where we are so that people can understand what the current development deal is. Then Alan DeLisle, the previous director of development under Mayor Kreisman, will spend about 20 minutes talking about the current development agreement. Then we will open up for questions. We are hoping to be able to answer questions following tonight's meeting throughout the week and encourage residents to check out Ron Diner's website, nohomerun.com. If you have questions, please type them in the chat function, and we will address as many as possible following the presentation. We will try to follow up with the remaining questions throughout the week and are available by email and phone to discuss further. So, with no further ado, let's get started. First, let's talk about public funding for the stadium and gas plant redevelopment. Rays-Hines is offering $105 million to purchase the 64 acres of land adjacent to the Tropicana field. They are asking for $287.5 million of a stadium subsidy from the City of St. Petersburg residents, as well as $130 million for infrastructure. They are asking for a $312.5 million stadium subsidy from Pinellas County. The City of St. Petersburg will have to borrow the money by taking out bond debt and paying it back over 30 years. The total amount of debt for the stadium subsidy ends up being approximately $700 million. If Pinellas County finances the contribution to Rays-Hines, it would end up being approximately $586.6 million. The total between the city and the county after financing would be approximately $1.3 billion, as previously reported in the Tampa Bay Times article published on October 5th, 2023, titled "Rays Stadium Deal Could Cost Public Nearly Double What Officials Say." Many people are under the impression that this is a done deal. However, City Council has not yet voted, and the development agreement was just released on April 25th. Before April 25th, no one knew what the final terms of the agreement were, and therefore, they should not have endorsed the project without knowing the details of the deal. The first time the public was able to see the draft development terms was within the agenda of the Committee of the Whole meeting on October 26, 2023. The final development agreement is available for the public to view by going to the agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting on the City of St. Petersburg website. There will be two Committee of the Whole meetings, one on May 9th to review the Tropicana redevelopment and one on May 23rd to review the stadium subsidy. City Council will then vote between two different meetings in June. The County Commission also has to vote, but has not yet scheduled the dates. So why do taxpayers pay for stadiums? And why don't taxpayers get to vote on this deal? CNBC published a great 15-minute long video on YouTube called Why Taxpayers Pay for NFL Stadiums. It is very explanatory about everything from municipal bonds used to fund stadiums and how bonds allow for tax avoidance as well as low interest financing for the stadium. I highly recommend watching it as it is very informative. Since revenues from the stadium as well as stadium rent cannot be used to pay back the bonds, the only way the bonds can be paid back is by the taxpayers or with hotel taxes. When it comes to financing new stadiums, professional sports teams and cities employ various strategies to avoid public referendums. One of the approaches they take is direct approval by elected officials without going through a public referendum. Another question residents have is, how will the city pay back the bonds? The bonds will be paid back with TIF money, which is tax increment financing. Tax increment financing is a public financing method that is used as a subsidy for redevelopment and other community improvement projects. The original intent of the TIF program was to stimulate private investment into a blighted area that has been designated to be in need of economic revitalization. Municipalities typically divert future property tax revenue increases from a defined area or district toward an economic development project. Rays Hines proposes using TIF funds out of the in-town community redevelopment area, or CRA. Here's an image that shows what real estate is included within the in-town CRA. It includes the real estate and all the high rises on Central Avenue, as well as Beach Drive, some of the most valuable real estate in the city of St. Petersburg. The in-town CRA was established in 1986 to revitalize the economically disadvantaged and blighted downtown area. The city is proposing extending this CRA until the year 2042. If you look at the slide, you can see on the third column, the TIF funds is highlighted. And at 2042, the money starts coming out of the general fund, which is the furthest left column. This is a city slide. It's in the Committee of the Whole meeting agenda from October 26th. That means that half of the property tax from that CRA, half of the property taxes from those valuable high rises and commercial real estate on Central Avenue and Beach Drive will be diverted to pay for the stadium bonds until 2042. And then the money starts coming out of the general funds. So now let's move on to the development itself. This is a slide from the development agreement that was released on April 25th. It shows the Phase A development in blue. The letter H represents the location of the new stadium, located on the east side of the existing parking lot. The next slide shows the contributions from the public toward infrastructure. The public will contribute funds in 4 phases for a total of $130 million by the year 2035. And going back to the previous slide, you can see that in the same period of time, in 12 years, Rays Hines will only have paid $50 million. You can see that red arrow. They pay a maximum of $50 million in the first 12 years. So in the same time period, the public will have contributed funds for a total of $130 million. The land that the development will be located on will remain the property of the county, until the individual parcels are purchased by Rays Hines. And Michael Harrison from Hines said during the October 26th committee of the whole meeting that they will not pay property taxes until individual buildings are put into service. Here is a slide that shows the infrastructure for Phase A. And it is clear to see that a majority of the infrastructure funded by the public will be for the stadium itself. The city will also be responsible for constructing and paying for a new lift station at a cost of approximately $12 million. And this is a very good slide. It shows the minimum development for the project. You can see that there is a total of 3,800 market rate residential apartments, 1,250 affordable housing units, 600 of which are on site. There's also a million square feet, of which at least 500,000 square feet will be Class A office, and 50,000 square feet will be for a museum. So I just want to point out that the million square feet can be multiple building types, including retail, arts, recreation, entertainment, education, public administration, healthcare, and institutional. So there's a wide range of building types within that million square feet. And then at least 500,000 square feet will be Class A office over the 30 years. There'll be 400 hotel rooms and 50,000 square feet for conference, ballroom, or meeting space, and only 10 acres for open space, and at least one daycare, childcare, preschool, or similar. The next slide shows the minimum development within the first 10 years. And the way it's divided up is in thirds. So a third of the total minimum development will be built every 10 years. So you can see within the various real estate uses that are allowed, it's 333,000 square feet, of which at least 166,000 square feet will be for Class A office space, another 130 hotel rooms, and then 16,000 square feet for convention center, and at least one daycare or child care center. And the museum is not shown on this first phase to be required to be completed. So since the estimated property tax revenue that was projected to be generated by this project was based on the development starting on day one and based on full build out, the property tax revenues need to actually be adjusted downward to reflect the current minimum development schedule. Also, in regards to the amount of office space that's being constructed, as far as 166,000 square feet of office space, it's really not that much. If you look at Orange Station, which is now called the Central, and it's located where the old police station was, that building by comparison will provide 125,000 square feet of office space. Since the key strategy of this project is to be an economic engine and attract businesses to the area and provide high-paying office jobs, it is actually not that much Class A office space that we would hope for. This slide shows the number of affordable workforce housing units, and you can see the amount of units divided or designated by the AMI. So mostly people consider affordable housing 80% AMI or 60% AMI, which is a total of 650 units out of the total. And out of the 1,250, 600 must be on site, but only 200 units that are 80% AMI or below will be located on site, which is what people consider to be affordable housing. So that's a pretty low number of affordable housing units on site. And only 100 of those will be built by 2028. The remaining 300 don't have to be built until 2030, and 100 have to be 55 and up. This is the damages if they don't build the affordable housing. Previously, they had $25,000 per unit. After the Community Benefit Advisory Council met, we recommended they increase it to $175,000 per unit. Instead, they chose to raise it in 2037 to $50,000 and in 2047 to $75,000. However, it's still much less than it would cost to build a unit, which is typically around $300,000. So it's a very low amount that they could just write a check and potentially not build anything. This shows the development schedule for the stadium at the top and the phases for the real estate development at the bottom. And I think there's quite a bit of contrast between the two. If you look at the stadium development, you can see that it's very well planned. It's got detailed phases for construction with a quick timeline of April 2028 completion. And if you look at the lower slide, you see starting dates and no detail at all. So I think that this conveys where the priorities are as far as what gets built first and how soon it gets built. This is a slide just about the land disposition, and you can read some more details on the slideshow as it gets forwarded out. So this is just for reference only, and we really encourage people to ask questions throughout the week after they read this, and we'll do our best to get back to you with any information that can be helpful. So I just want to go ahead and pass the presentation on to Alan DeLisle. He's going to go over the development agreement that was just released on April 25th.
Kari, thank you very much, and tremendous presentation, great overview. I just want to spend most of my time just doing one thing, which is from an economic development perspective. I've been an economic developer for 45 years. I've worked for 4 different cities, 4 different mayors, and my specialty has been public-private partnerships. I have negotiated a number of multi-million-dollar public-private partnerships, and I think that I have gained enough knowledge over the years to know a good deal from a bad deal. And I get calls from cities to review development agreements, and from developers, quite honestly, who want to make sure that they're not walking into a bad situation. I have no financial interest. I have no interest at all, any special interest at all in this. I have no allegiance or loyalties to any particular group. I am simply somebody that worked for the city for 7 years, worked hard for the city for 7 years. I'm proud of the economic development that we did for those 7 years. And in conjunction with all of you, really built a great economy for St. Pete. So I worry about St. Pete in terms of economic development, and I worry about this project. So all of that is to say that I really can't say it any other way. This is a very bad project, and I've gone through the development agreement very carefully, and I have 22 specific reasons why this is a bad deal. And I have written a 12-page paper that explains why and cites specific statute or provisions in the document so that you can all read that. It is published on No Home Run on the website, so you can go and get the details. I'm just going to touch on it today, hit the high points, hopefully, and we'll go from there. Next slide. Kari, are we putting up the slides for my presentation?
Can you see the screen, Alan, on your end?
Yeah, but I'm still seeing your presentation.
Oh, you're not seeing the purple slides?
No.
Lynn, are you able to see the purple slides?
Kari, you may need to at least.
Let me stop and start again.
Oh, I think Kari.
Oh, here we go. I got it right here.
If not, I can just hit the high points without the slides, but if we got the slides, great. Here we go.
Okay, great. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. All right, so Kari did a great job explaining this, and I really do think this slide says a lot. It really shows why this deal is so bad, and I guess the best word that I can come up with is it's imbalanced. You've got the stadium moving forward, being developed by 2028, and you've got the rest of the development site, which is so precious to St. Pete, not being developed until 2054, and that is only the minimum development. And so, and then there's, as I'll get into this later, there's so many outs that the developer has to not produce or not perform, even with the minimum development, that the city could be left with very little other than the stadium, which is my biggest concern. Next slide. So how is the development agreement structured? So the flaws in the agreement, in my opinion, start very early, when somehow the city decided to have a different time frame for the stadium than for the rest of the development, which I'll call the non-stadium development. So as we just saw, they're on totally different time frames. They're funded completely differently at different times. And the city's investment is all up front, and the developer's investment is over time. And then with all kinds of outs, so many outs that, I don't think that there is a lot to hold their feet to the fire. Now, in my business for 45 years, one of the principles in economic development is to never do that. You always want to make sure that the private developer is moving at the same speed as you, as the public. And most of the time you want that even before you want the private sector investing first, and then the public sector comes in. This is completely reversed. So by separating the two, is a huge mistake right up front. They should have kept the whole project together, and instead of having development by parcels, they should have had development by phases. And I'll get into more of that later. So I also want to point out here that I spent a lot of time on the Trop when I was here, and I spent a lot of time looking at other cities that had done similar stadium and non-stadium development at the same time. And I went and visited Atlanta. I sat down with the Atlanta Braves president, went through their project very carefully. I read a lot about San Diego. In both cases, there was no public money for non-stadium development, none. There's money for the stadium, but not money for the development around the stadium. That was all privately financed, including the infrastructure and including the land. The land was purchased at market value. So the city of St. Pete is way out of whack with those two cities. Next slide. So why did we get to this particular case, or this particular situation where the deal is so bad? In my humble opinion, the mistake was made early when the mayor and many of the council members really just kind of bought into keeping the Rays and didn't see the project, as the former mayor did, Mayor Kreisman, as a way to keep the Rays, but also make sure that the city got what it needed with development around the stadium, i.e. office, jobs, et cetera. And so that's why you don't separate the two. You should never separate the two. And basically, in my humble opinion, the city lost all of its leverage by the way they did it. They did the RFP. They basically threw away a great deal with Midtown. They got rid of all the competition. Once they made the selection, they didn't sit down and bang out the term sheet ahead of making the announcement of who they picked. And that's a principle in my field that I always followed. You never pick a developer until you work out the deal first. And so that was a huge mistake. The next slide. That's the time frame, and I think we can go to the next slide. I think we covered that pretty well. Okay, so Kari got into this, so I'm not gonna micromanage this slide again. But let me just say this, that the land discount, which is worth about 174 million, that's how much they've discounted the land. The city indicated in a slide early on, they added up why they discounted the land. 64 million was for open space. Now, in my book, the developer pays for parkland, not the city. Why? Because the developer is going to benefit from the parkland because they're going to be able to charge rents based on the beauty of the site. So I have no idea why the city is paying for the open space out of the reduction in the land value. There was 10.6 million for affordable housing. That sounds reasonable to me. There's 2.3 million for the museum in the reduction of the land. And then there's $50 million reduction in the community benefits. Now, in my world, community in the definition in economic development, community benefits are paid for by the developer. That's the whole concept behind it. It's not paid for by the city. And then you give the developer credit for that. So I don't understand that. And then this is very interesting is that, the city is paying 130 million for the infrastructure, which is way out of whack. And then they indicated that the developer was going to pay 53 million in addition to that. Well, I don't think that's going to happen for two reasons. First of all, I don't think, the way it's structured is the city's money is all in first, and the developer gets to manage that money. So they will manage it to the 130 million, in my opinion. But if it gets over 130 million, in the development agreement, it says that a special assessment district will be set up so that the property owners will be charged to pay for the developer's infrastructure. So the developer is not paying anything, but yet the city is paying 130 million. It doesn't seem fair to me. So if you kind of break that down, if you looked at the comparison between what was going to happen in the Midtown deal, which I negotiated, the city was going to put 75 million into infrastructure, and the developer was going to put 93.8 million into infrastructure. Now we have a situation in this deal where the city is paying 130 million and the developer is paying nothing. That is not a public-private partnership. That is a public project that's lowering the risk to the private developer. That's all that's doing. Next slide. So Kari did a great job on this, and I'll just say this, that if you look at what is going to be spent in the first couple of years of this project, and Kari kind of hit on this, the developer has one obligation, 50 million over 12 years upfront, 50 million over 12 years. The city is going to be paying in the first 2 years, $254 million. What's that from? That's 80 million in infrastructure, phase 1 and phase 2, and 174 million in the reduction of real estate. It's $254 million upfront that the city's putting into this deal. How much is the developer paying over 2 years? 15 million. That's what they have to spend to buy property out of that 50 million in the first 2 years. Again, this is a public project, not a public-private project. At least from the perspective of the city just taking the risk and lowering the risk to the private developer who's going to make all the money in the end. Okay, next slide. And this is, I've already indicated this, but again, I looked very closely at the Atlanta Braves and the San Diego Padres. All that development was paid for by the private developer, the infrastructure, the land at market rate. And so, you know, for the city to step in and pay for all of the infrastructure and give such a discount on the property, just is not in line with what other cities have done. Next slide. Okay, so this slide, I want to point out, and Kari touched on this, the development agreement allows for what they call parcel developers, which means not Hines, but another developer can come in and do a particular parcel for Hines. I guess my response to that would be, wow, good luck with managing that, overseeing that, and being comfortable with that. Because the parcel developer has every right that the master developer has in terms of not purchasing parcels because of certain reasons, being able to delay for certain reasons. So instead of dealing with one entity, you could be dealing with 10 or 15. That is not a good position for a city to be in. Again, an economic development principle that I've learned over 45 years. Now, Kari talked about the 33% of the minimum has to be done in the first 10 years. You got to be kidding me. 66 in the next 10 years or 20 years in year 20, and then 100% in year 30, but not really. It's not really 100%. Why? Because there are 3 major outs. And let me tell you, I've never seen language like this in the development agreement in all my years. I've never seen language that protects a developer and gives the developer basically easy outs wherever they want to. So I don't have a lot of faith even in the minimum development based on my 45 years of being in this business and doing major projects. And I will, if you read my paper, I indicate what provisions you should read, but I'm going to mention a couple of them. Article 1 is the definitions. You got to look at the definition of excusable development delays. Look at that language. I mean, basically, every out that a developer wants, they have, including, believe it or not, they can delay on the minimum development if there's delays in the stadium. Well, who controls the stadium? We talked about this parcel, developing by parcel instead of phases. A developer can reject parcels based on a very wide definition. Let me read you the definition. The developer can reject any parcel for architectural, environmental, geotechnical, soils, subsurface conditions. I get this one, or lack of access or materially impaired access to a parcel. Now, I know that there's some developers on this call, and you know that gives you just about everything you need to pass on a parcel if you need to. So I have no real confidence that the city has protected itself. It seems like the developer can do almost anything they want. And the last out, if you call it, is section 16.1.1 in the development agreement. And basically, they can delay, believe it or not, they can delay the minimum development by another 3 years if they reach 80% of the minimum goal. So I know I'm hitting on a lot of topics here, but I'm just trying to give you highlights of how bad I think this deal is. Okay, now I just, before we move on, I just want to mention the community benefits piece. We talked a little bit about it before, but I want to mention another aspect of it. And that is one of the things that when I was there, the thing that was most that the advocates of South St. Pete required in most of the conversations that I had, in all the conversations that I had, that there would be a 20 to 30% minority business participation rate. I almost fell off my chair when I saw 10% in this deal. And it's 10% is the goal. 10% is not required. It's just a goal. Now, in the Midtown deal that I negotiated, we were doing 20% across the board, and it was a requirement. They had to do it, or they could be terminated. That's how strong the language was. Next slide. Now, let me just check on how I'm doing time-wise. Okay. So here, I guess just two big questions. One question is, okay, what happens if the Rays sell after the stadium is built? It'll increase their value tremendously. It has. Look at other stadiums that have sold. One stadium sold like 1 year after it was done, and there was like a 150% increase in the sale, or something like that. So with all this city investment up front, does the city get any return if the Rays are sold? I don't think so. Not according to the DA. And then every time I do a deal or did a deal in my career, I always made sure that we reviewed the private developer pro forma for the non-stadium development to see how much money they were making. What's their return on investment? Well, they don't have to pay for infrastructure. They don't have to pay for land. They get grants on affordable housing. Their cost structure is minimal, and they're going to make a lot of money on the minimum development, especially for market rate housing of 3,800 units. So how come the city isn't getting anything there? The city's giving up all its revenue based on the stadium and giving up naming rights revenue, and they're not getting anything back on the development project. Next slide. And we're going to go fast on here. I just wanted to point out again, the target development, which is the big development that the economic impact study was based on. Just throw it away. It doesn't mean anything. There's no requirements. The only thing that counts is the minimum development. So to do an economic impact analysis on the target development is absurd. And the only thing that should happen before this is passed, they should do another economic impact analysis just on the DA, or just on the development that's required in the DA, not on the proposal. And I think Kari covered the office piece very well. Basically that equates to 16,000 square feet of office development a year. I was hoping for a lot more, and Class B and Class C office space is not even dealt with. Next slide, please. Just want to make a point that I was disappointed that, there was no reference to the Grow Smarter plan or industries, no reference in the DA to the Innovation District, no reference to local small businesses, no special set-asides for local small businesses to rent at an affordable amount, space. And that was the case in the Midtown deal that we did. No reference to Deuces Live, no reference to the Arts District. Next slide. And Kari will skip to the next one. And this is just basically underscoring what Kari mentioned earlier. The developer doesn't have to do anything for 10 years per the development agreement. They have to do 1/3 of the minimum development in year 10. So basically, they'll say otherwise. They'll say, the developer will say, "Oh, we're going to do this." The Rays are going to, "Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that." Yeah, but it's not in the development agreement. You got to put it in the development agreement. If you're going to say it, then put it in, and then okay, then everything's fair. But again, very lopsided, imbalanced deal. Next slide. Okay, I think I hit on this, but I'm just gonna break this down. In the first 10 years, I kind of did the 2-year piece. In the first 10 years, the city is gonna spend $304 million and the developer is gonna spend somewhere between 40 and 50 million buying property. The 304 million is the infrastructure and the free land. Next slide. I think Kari hit on this, the affordable housing, very well. I don't even count the 500 units at 120 AMI. You know, that's basically market rate for that area. So it comes down to 600 units. Oh, I do want to mention this, and this is where you have to read the development agreement to see like all the special language that can come back and bite the city. It says that 600 units will be on the TROP site, affordable housing units, right? Or, and this is a quote, it says in section 5.1.2, or as may be mutually agreed to by developer and the city. So, ladies and gentlemen, it may not be 600 units. It might be one. Because the mayor can decide to make a different deal on that later on based on that language. The penalties are meaningless. I know that Kari showed the penalties. Why do I say that? Well, because it's only 10%. Well, hang on here, just there's. Oh, the subsidies are so high that, in my opinion, there is no way that this development team cannot meet the affordable housing requirements. So to me, the penalties are just a little bit of show. In my opinion, the affordable housing should be restricted for forever. Instead of whatever it is, 20 years, 30 years, with all those subsidies, it should be restricted forever. Next slide. I'm going to wrap up. I think we've covered the infrastructure. I just can't believe that the roads, the parks, all the green space, the trails, the utilities, all of that is being paid for by the city. Those in a project like this, those are developer responsibilities. Special assessment, letting the developer off the hook to pay anything for infrastructure. How come the city doesn't benefit from that? And then the impact of the special assessment on affordability is going to drive up the cost of rent because the property owners are going to have to pay a special assessment. So if you care about affordability, you wouldn't do that. And again, the developer's not paying anything. Kari will skip the next slide and go to 19. Talked a little bit about the default requirements, but I just want you to read, if you can write this down, read in the development agreement 16.9.5, section 16.9.6, and section 16.9.7. Basically, ladies and gentlemen, the city cannot terminate this developer for any reason. And if the developer doesn't perform in any particular situation, anything that they've done before that, they can continue. When we had Midtown, it was, if they failed to perform, they got terminated. That's not the case here. Kari mentioned the open space. This I cannot believe, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, when I was here, everybody was in an uproar even before we got done selecting Midtown, that we had to have a lot of open space. 10 acres. I almost fell off my chair with 10 acres. Midtown had 24.7 acres of parkland. And then the last two slides, Kari, I think we're good. We can go to questions. I think I'm pretty much wrapped up. Again, very imbalanced, fundamentally flawed. You can't make this better by tinkering on the margins, which is what the city has been doing. You have got to go back to the table and make this a better deal for the city and the city residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. I really appreciate all your input. And while I have you on the phone, I just wanted to ask the first question from the audience, and you might have a good answer for it. It says, why wasn't the invitation to negotiate sourcing method used instead of an RFP? The invitation to negotiate allows concurrent negotiations, and a final development deal is reached through the process, not months after selection of a single firm. Are you familiar with that?
Well, yeah, and I concur with that. I mean, again, I don't know that I specifically called it that, or that, we in the cities that I worked in as an economic development director or as a deputy city manager, what we did though was something very similar, which was, we negotiated the deal before we made the selection, which is what this is getting at. And I think if the city had done that, they would have come up with a much better deal than the way they backed into it and gave all the leverage to the Rays.
That's a great answer. I appreciate that. And we also have another question, and I can speak to this. And I think a lot of the people on the phone call tonight who have been tirelessly trying to ask questions and get information from the city and have had a pretty challenging time of it. The question is, what do the city council members say to you, those that are supporting the deal? Do they dispute your figures? And many of us have tried to get further information from the city, and some people have tried to schedule a meeting with the mayor and have to date been unsuccessful. And it seems like there's a lot of opportunity for public comments. You can go and speak for 3 minutes, but it's more difficult to get answers. And at one point I attended the city hall on tour at Child's Park and tried to get answers from some of the administration on why the developer has the right to assign, which means that they can acquire the parcels and then immediately transfer them and sell them to another developer. And I didn't feel that I got a sufficient answer. And then I was actually confronted by another person who's not with the city and criticized for not being qualified to serve on the Community Benefit Advisory Council. So instead of getting an answer, I was the one that was put under criticism. So that's my personal experience. And if anybody else who's on the call has any more input that they want to offer as far as city council and their response to some of the information that we've tried to raise, I'd be more than happy to hear what people have to say. Well, I know Ron Diner is on the call, and I know that he's presented to a few different meetings. And he's gone into great detail with his analysis. And I've been in a lot of the meetings that have been presented that go into the analysis of these numbers, and I can verify that they're accurate. And at one point he's been criticized for being wrong. And he asked, well, how am I wrong? And he's never been able to get a clear answer. So I think that that's pretty representative of some of the response from city council.
Can I pipe in for a minute?
Hi, Velva. Go ahead.
Okay, hi. I'm Velva Harity of downtown St. Pete. Hi, Ellen. It's been a long time.
Hey, Velva. Good to see you.
Thanks. I went through Savings Spa Beach Park before, if anybody remembers that drama with the artwork. It was a nightmare. And the only reason we were managed to save Spa Beach Park, do you remember that, Ellen? I think you were here.
Yes, I do. Yes.
The only reason we were able to succeed was an outpouring of civil a response that was incredibly impressive. I opened a Facebook page, and 2 weeks later, I got 1,500 responders, all of them as angry as I was, that this fabulous piece of nature was going to be contaminated by some neon colored thing that was the size of a football field. Nobody wanted it. It wasn't about the art, it was about the location. And there's another thing called passive parks. So I think that there's a lot of passive parks in St. Pete that are vulnerable now. Like Mirror Lake, it really was a passive park, and now, of course, it's being developed. So everyone is very tricky. I was at one council meeting where I made a very valid point, valid legal point. The lawyer for the city got up, went back, went somewhere, came back, and wrote a new piece of legislation, legal legislation.
Melda, I'm sorry, we're running out of time, but I think you're bringing up some really great points because what you're commenting about is the fact that it can be a very difficult process and it's not a straightforward path. So, we do really appreciate what you have brought to the table and your experience and your background. And so I just want to add on to that because one of the questions that I think is a good segue is people were asking, what can we do on this imbalanced deal? What can taxpayers do to stop or delay this development agreement? And we just want to really emphasize the importance of contacting your city council representative and putting it on public record and attending the city council meetings and speaking in public comments. And I do believe that there'll be a lot of us in attendance at this week's Thursday Committee of the Whole meeting that starts at 9 a.m. And we're going to continue to have these conversations every week so that we can stay informed and we can continually reach out to city council and specifically address the problems that we see with this deal and demand that they improve the terms before they approve it. I just want to read another comment someone had, which I think is also very important. It says, I see almost no mention of environmental sustainability of development or solar and water conservation and energy conservation, etc. And I replied to her that I think this is a very important topic and that we should cover it in future meetings. And I also want to remind everyone that there's a town hall tomorrow night at Enoch Davis. It's going to be presented by Faith in Florida and the Sierra Club. So that's going to be a great opportunity to learn more about some of the sustainability priorities that the Sierra Club is asking for this development deal to address, which are pretty basic and reasonable ask. And at this point, they're not included. So that's something else we need advocacy from the public to try to demand some of these sustainability measures are addressed. And if you go to the Facebook page for the Suncoast Sierra Club, you can find a letter that they've written that outlines some of their demands to make this a better project. I'm just reading through the comments. I'm trying to get to most of them. And then if we don't get to them tonight, we're more than happy to follow up at the next meeting and then also throughout the week. So one person commented that there are currently 3 no votes against this project from Lizette Hanowitz, Richie Floyd, and Councilman Muhammad. So if we had one more no vote, this project would not move forward. At this point, we believe we have 3 yes votes. So it's really hanging in the balance. And that's why it's so important for the community to become activated in this last month of time. I have a question here that says, if this deal goes through, how much will the city pay for future infrastructure needs? Also, what financial impact will this deal have on some of the lower income neighborhoods in the south side. And I just want to go back to the way the project is funded with the in-town CRA and the 50% of the property taxes that will be siphoned off to pay for the stadium bonds. And the fact of that matter is that over time, costs increase. Services like fire department services, police department services, water and sewer and infrastructure and roads, all the costs for labor and materials will continue to increase with inflation over time. And the way our budget is now, we may have funds allocated to cover these services. But as more people move here and cost of services go up, we're going to need more tax dollars to be able to pay for those services. And if we're already obligating 50% of the property taxes from the in-town CRA, we're not going to be able to cover those increases in costs. And in my opinion, and I've had people from city council tell me that I'm incorrect, but I firmly believe that at that point, then we would potentially be looking at property taxes having to be raised to cover those costs. And go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, Karen, it's Tom Owens. This may be an easy question. Alan, if you would put your St. Pete loyalty aside for a moment and just, if I can ask you, is this the right, if you were trying to optimize access to baseball for the whole Tampa Bay wide fan base, is this the right place to put it in downtown St. Pete near the tip of a peninsula surrounded by water on three sides?
No, I think my personal opinion, based on being hearing about this for 7 years, is this is not. I mean, the Rays made it clear that this is not the best site for them to be at, but I think this deal is so good for them that even they can't resist it, right? I mean, they talked about Montreal or nothing. They talked about Tampa or nothing. I mean, Tampa put a horrible deal. Tampa put a sliver of what St. Pete put on the table. I mean, it was minimal. Why? Because Tampa, I think they thought it through and they knew that, what the Rays were asking for was unrealistic. But I think because this deal is that good for the Rays, and I say that it's that good for the Rays, but I think, I think it's really, in the end, it's not going to be good for the Rays because of because of all of you and what's happening as people look at this deal more and more closely, they're gonna get bit by it.
It's such an overreach. I mean, they're going to end up, they have tremendous goodwill in the community now, and they're going to end up burning a whole bunch of that as more and more of the case facts filter out here. And people realize just what the magnitude of the grab that this is. It's an astonishing grab. But I just wanted to ask you about that. And it seems to me one of the, and maybe you have more insight and kind of inside baseball into this. I mean, it seems to me the last thing the Rays would ever want to do while they have this opportunity to make a gigantic fortune from developing this area. The last thing they want to do is have a good faith negotiation with any other alternative site. As long, because then people would, I don't know, I just think people would the public would encourage them to explore the other more conventional and practical sites for baseball that would work better for the fan base and better from a parking standpoint, better from a I don't know, just overall development concept standpoint.
It's a great comment, Tom, and I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate your advocacy in working with Ron Diner on the editorial for the Tampa Bay Times.
Sure.
And I just wanted to bring up one last comment about City Council. People were asking who they believe is in support of the project, and I believe that is Council Member Copley Gertis, Deborah Fig Sanders, and also Brandy Gabbard. And a person, Tony, said he tried to meet with Gertis and he essentially did not listen to a word I said. I also had a difficult time getting anywhere speaking with Copley Gertis. He said he had a meeting scheduled with Montanari and he canceled and would not reschedule. I also tried to meet with Ed Montanari at least 3 times, and I was canceled when I first went on this advisory council, and then I rescheduled, and then the advisory council added another meeting, and then I had to cancel again, and I was never able to reschedule with Ed. I have spoken to him at some fundraising events, and he went back into the 30-year history of St. Petersburg and the book Stadium for Rent and how difficult it was to get the team in the first place, which I've read. I encourage everyone to read it. You can get a copy of it on eBay. It's called Stadium for Rent. And that has really influenced Gina and Ed's motivation to do whatever possible to keep the team, which I think is very apparent in the terms of the development deal. But Jeremy said Ed is supposed to be fiscally conservative as a Republican, and he's deluded as to why this is a good deal, and he deserves to hear exactly what his voters think of this awful shakedown. And I think that that's a really important point because he is running for office. And I think that that is our most important leverage and tool, that we can vote depending on how this project goes is going to influence our future vote of these elected officials. And I think we need to make that clear to everyone on city council. So I really appreciate everyone's time. We're going to try to respond to the remainder of these questions, and this video will be posted on nohomerun.com. You can share it with your friends and family. We also have yard signs. If you're interested, please contact us. They say strike a better deal, and we're trying to go to the Saturday morning market and give out information. So if there's anything else that you need, just feel free to reach out to us and we'll try to get back to you. And we really appreciate everyone's time, and I hope to see you again next week.